Hey BookTube, it's Sarah and welcome back to my channel, The Book Bag. Today I have my mom with me again for another edition of the Mother-Daughter Book Club, and we are going to be talking about Don't Call It a Cult by Sarah Berman. So this is a true crime story about Keith Raniere and the NXIVM cult, which I'd never heard of before, but it started out as like a self-help pyramid scheme basically, and ended up getting a lot of like famous people involved in it, and then it turned into a subsection of that being a cult where they like had sex slaves and branded women and stuff. So just right off the deep end. Yeah, what did you think of it?
Well, I'm just thinking about what you just said about a pyramid scheme self-help group. There's something doesn't seem quite right just about putting those two descriptors together, right? So this isn't all that long ago either, and I don't really remember this in the news either very much. I know it was, but I think it got overshadowed by the Harvey Weinstein debacle that was going on at that time too. That kind of came out first, and then this was along the same lines in a lot of ways, right? So it was interesting to learn about the cult itself and how that worked. And it's kind of, to me, it was sort of like a good idea, maybe like a good premise, on the surface,
right,
that went horribly wrong. I shouldn't say wrong. It's not really. It was deliberately done.
Yeah, like it went right for him.
Yeah, it went right for him. Yeah, but for the people in it who were hoping to get help for some of their issues, they were struggling with things. It was just awful.
Not the kind of help you think you were going to get.
No, and I think this brings you back to the fact that there's you see a lot of these kind of groups that are going to help you with your issues, but I think one of the first things you want to ask is, what are the credentials of the people who are running this group? Are they professionals who can really help you or not? That's the first thing you want to think about.
Or are they just some guy who took an IQ test and it's like, I'm the smartest man in the world, you should believe everything I say.
Yeah, that was sort of where everything started, wasn't it? That was sort of how he drew people to him. He was the smartest man in the world, which, as you go through the book, you realize, no, not really.
Well, even off the bat, because he's basing this on an IQ test he had done where he had a team of people do it for him to get all the right answers. Mm-hmm. And it's like a flawed IQ test to start with, and then it's a self-administered one. So you can do that and just like have people answer it for you and be like, I'm a genius. And he was in the Guinness Book of World Records and they didn't like verify it or anything.
I think we should do that test too.
Right? Yeah. Together we could be the smartest people with the internet, with the help of Google.
Yeah, there we go. So and that was the thing. That was his whole thing, that if you ask anybody about him, and that was what they would tell you. He's the smartest man in the world. Well, how do you know that? Well, it's in the Guinness Book of World Records. It must be. They must have verified, but they didn't really. And then, yes, the test was flawed and everything. So, but besides that, the book itself, I think we had slightly different opinions about the book itself because of how it was set up. I'm used to reading this type of a story where there's a linear storyline where you're talking, in 1990 this happened, 1991 this happened, that sort of thing. This one I found jumped around a lot, back and forth, and it was more character centered. Each chapter was talking about a different person that was involved in this situation. So I found that a little I shouldn't say difficult to follow, but it was different than I expected, I guess is probably better to say.
Yeah, I think, I didn't struggle with that as much. I do think it was weird.
Did I say I struggled with it?
I don't think I disliked it as much as you did. Or the only thing I didn't enjoy was at the beginning, they started with like Sarah Edmondson, who had, I guess who was like the whistleblower who went to the FBI. And then it like wrapped up with her, which I guess was a good full circle thing. But by the time we got back to her, I'd forgotten what had happened to her in the first bit. And I was like, wait, which one is this again? Because
yeah, it was quite a cast of characters. It's sort of like Game of Thrones or something, right? Those kind of stories. There's all these different people in it, so trying to keep track of who they were. And some of them, there was, like we talked about India Oxenberg, who was thrown in at the end. Like, I don't remember reading about her before, and all of a sudden there she is near the very end. Yeah. I'm like, why did we put her in when she wasn't there before? Except her mother was a famous actress, but I don't know if that was the intent. But it was interesting to read about. I think we had talked about the ending of the book, because this is recently, as we're filming this in 2022, the results of some of these trials only came out in 2021. So not even a year later.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably more to the story. For example, there were still people at the end who still believed in all this stuff that Raniere, was teaching them and stuff, and were still, had bought right into this hook, line, and sinker. And, there was a lot of people involved in this. This is like probably tens of thousands of people, and, that took some of these courses and things like that, right, and believed in these principles. So what happened with some of those people?
And the self-help centers that they said,
Yeah.
because part of the pyramid scheme was setting up these classrooms and courses and self-help studios around North America, like in Mexico and Canada and the States. And then are they still continuing on? And they're like, hey, disclaimer, turns out it's a cult, but if you want help, we're still here.
Yeah, so I don't know, because there were still a lot of people that just absolutely believed in what he was telling them to do and everything. And that was also interesting. They were talking about when you got into some of these groups. We talked about the one group that was, you were talking about branding and stuff like this, a women's, self-empowerment group. I think the first problem is we're going to brand you. Well, that's a bit of an issue, I think, maybe. Yeah. So there was, it had completely degenerated by that point in time, I would say.
Yeah.
And I think he was just trying to get people to, I think he was, I don't want to say experimenting on people, but sort of mentally, really.
Yeah, I think you've seen how far he could push boundaries and what he could get people to do, because it started out with self-help and believing everything he said, and then turned into, I have this small group of women who are my slaves, and then they recruit other slaves, and then I can tell them all what to do, and they have sworn obedience to me for the rest of their lives, and I have blackmail on them, so they can't really go against me.
Yeah.
What can I make them do?
Yeah, but and that
anything,
was
pretty much.
What can I make them do, and why they would do this? But I think when you read through the book and they describe some of the things they would do. So if you were a slave, they would, they could wake you up in the middle of the night, just wake you up, and you had to be ready to go and do whatever they said and stuff. So a lot of, mind altering kind of, you're not getting enough sleep. These classes that they would do would go for hours and hours and hours.
14-hour days, 5 days in a row.
Some of these women are on very restricted calorie diets, 500 calories a day, that type of thing. So, brainwashing, really.
Yeah.
Brainwashing tactics and stuff. So no wonder they didn't resist, a lot of them. They didn't see any other way out, because I don't think they had the energy to think anything out. A lot of them were really, struggling, I think, and probably still are, I imagine. But I think, the book itself, if they had kept it, or waited, I should say, a little bit longer, perhaps, another year afterwards, and seeing, where things were at that point in time. Mm-hmm. Because there were still people at the end of the book that they hadn't described what happened to them. You know that they were charged, but they didn't resolve what happened to them. I think that's been resolved now, but
probably, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that would have been a little bit more helpful if they gave a little bit of time. Sort of at the end of the book, it was a little rushed.
Yeah,
the wrap up.
Yeah, I think a lot of true crime books are ones that the annual books are stuff that happened 10 years ago or whatever, and so here's where they are now, sort of thing. They're still in jail, or they have a reduced sentence, or they got executed, that sort of stuff.
Because the main character in this, if you will, Keith Raniere, he was charged and he was convicted, and his sentence was
120 years and a big fine of some sort.
Yeah, over $1 million, I think, that he had to pay back. Now, anytime you have that kind of a sentencing result, there's typically an appeal, right? Yeah. So there was nothing mentioned in the book about that. I'm sure that there would be an appeal going on there, because he didn't plead guilty, I don't think.
No.
I don't remember that.
I'm not sure.
Well, they said that. A lot of the other people did plead guilty.
Yeah.
Actually, and admitted. I can't see him pleading guilty. That's
No.
not in his nature, I don't think. So I'm sure there's an appeal process that's probably ongoing right now, I would imagine. So that's, again, if you had things a little bit further along, you might have a little more not interesting information, a little more information about what's happened with some of these people. Even the reporter, Sarah Berman, or the author, she was a reporter, actually, too, for a journalist. And she was saying that she had talked to a woman on the street. This woman was talking to her, and, the conversation got around to this particular situation. And afterwards, she kind of wondered, because these people would stalk their enemies and dig into their emails and all this type of thing. And she was starting to wonder, maybe this person is involved with this group. And, I think she felt a little nervous about that, maybe.
Well, because there was one, was it the journalist or the attorney who was going after them? Who was he? Journalist? He was like a cult expert.
Oh, yes, that's
Ross.
right. Yes,
he was like
Ross.
a cult expert, and he was
right.
kind of digging into them, and they were suing him for things. They went through all his emails, and they had all his like tax information and everything. They hired private investigators to dig into his everything in his life to try and get him to like stop.
Yeah, and discredit him. They did it with a few people, actually. And so they had a lot of money behind them, too. That's the other thing, right? So they had the Bronfman sisters were in there, and they had a lot of money. And that's why they could do these things. They could, expand their empire, as it were, and they could also sue anybody or go after anybody that was trying to discredit them. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's kind of fair that people would not want to leave the cult if you're seeing, someone who's left or people who are, they're not even like real enemies. They're just kind of like, hey, maybe this is a little fishy. And then you've got the leaders who are like, we're going to sink millions of dollars into ruining their lives for saying something slightly negative about our group.
Right. Yeah.
So I could understand not wanting to.
They were the cautionary tale. Yeah. This is what happens to you if you go after us. So, yeah. It was a very unfortunate situation. I suspect these people that were coming to them wanting help, they're struggling. I don't think they would probably be better off afterwards. And a lot of money, millions, like $65 million, I think the Bronfman sisters spent, for this group in various ways, right? And you just think about how much good that money could have done put to other uses, right?
Yeah, like put into an actual charity and not whatever weird charity thing he had that was just funding the cult.
Yeah.
That also, like, at the beginning they were talking about how he read a lot of like Ayn Rand and like based a lot of his philosophies off that, and I was like, that's red flag number one. If you have someone who's like, I think Ayn Rand is my hero, leave. Run immediately. That's a red flag.
I haven't read her book, so I can't comment on that. But I know her books, but I haven't.
Philosophy is that you should be selfish, and altruism is not useful, and capitalism is like the highest god, and rationalism and all that.
That makes sense with him.
Yeah,
for his
thing was like, your emotions are your own fault, and you can control how you feel about everything. And if you're suffering, that's on you, and you should work through that and fix it yourself. But also that love is suffering, so if you're suffering, that's also good. I don't know.
Well, again, when you get into some of the things he said, like, one of these people who just talk, and you're so confused at the end, you think, oh, well, that must be brilliant, because he's the smartest man in the world, right? So I think that worked well for him, actually. Yeah, there was a lot of red flags, for sure, in this group. But, there were, obviously, Sarah Berman did a lot of research on this. Incredible amount of detail in this, all the different things, because at the end when the FBI was investigating, the emails back and forth, the phone conversations, all those types of things were available, I'm guessing, to her. Must have been, because
she has some of them, like, the text messages and stuff that he would send to his followers and things. Right.
So you could certainly, build a very comprehensive story about what actually happened in there and about the different people that were in it too. So, it was an interesting read, and like you said, we really weren't aware of this group, cult, whatever.
I think it's probably because it's for like the rich people too. Like that was another thing, is that everyone they recruited, maybe not quite everyone, but a lot of people they recruited were like upper class, very wealthy people, like they're actors and stuff.
That's true, yes.
Because the classes cost like tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, expensive.
So,
yeah,
it's just maybe too classy for us.
Speak for yourself, Sarah. Yeah, but a good read. Like, it was, very comprehensive, and it was a different, like I said, different structure than what I'm used to reading. But it was still, you could certainly see how it started and just how it degenerated down to just something terrible.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.